One is left with asking whether huge newspapers and tabloids, which also decline to endorse candidates, provide consumers with the freedom of choice. With confirmation becoming outdated, what does this make for future political reporting? If this authorization freeze is a trend, is it leading towards bringing abuse to new levels of unbiased journalism, or is it a flash in the pan? The consequence of this change could be highly impactful for the 2024 electoral year, making the event a complete game changer that you don't want to be left out of. So, stay till the end to learn how the situation impacts journalism and democracy in this country. This practice of endorsement freeze is now picking up. USA Today has decided not to endorse any candidate, saying they want to offer their readers the facts that matter so that they can decide on their own. The Tampa Times is also a relatively recent change, thus being a turning point in how newspapers approach elections. This approach may be translated into the fact that newspapers are no longer trying to pressure people to make a particular decision or a specific choice about the political climate, but are shifting their goals instead of simply presenting the news as they are and letting the people decide. This has warranted emotional responses, especially from the liberal staff who expect their papers to support candidates of their choice. We can now see that the role of endorsements seems to be changing as more newspapers steer clear of endorsing anyone. Whether this trend will change or not, only time will tell, but if it is true, perhaps newspapers are repositioning themselves within political polarization. Previously, it was a huge event for a newspaper to endorse a president choices candidate, which appeared to bring out controversies and even impact people's opinions. But such days, endorsements can hardly raise eyebrows, let alone garner positive attention, unless they are surprising or completely absent. People believe that major newspapers will support the Democrats because most news reported across the papers seems to have a liberal slant. Despite that, the 2024 race is an exception, and more papers are distancing themselves from conventional endorsements. Which people expected the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris?
That's why we fight for our democracy. That's why we fight for our democracy.
Instead, they failed to endorse anyone, which many of the people on their teams they fought for 4 years did not take kindly to, given that they painted former President Donald Trump as a danger to America. Surprisingly, the paper's owners, such as Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Washington Post.
However, it was canceled after the paper's billionaire owner, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, decided not to publish it.
Are not showing similar levels of agitation with his staff, as they are somewhat agitated with him. Bezos further said that the public no longer trusts the media and now has accepted that the press is biased. He perceives a hiatus in endorsements as a good thing. It means even tycoons also realize the desire to mend the truth. As for the credibility issues, Bezos was not polite, stating that they are connected with the Post and most significant newspapers. He said many important papers, such as the Washington Post and New York Times, appear more attentive to highbrow audiences than subscriber bases. What does this reveal about the concerns within media circles? In their view, these decisions hint that news executives might think a Trump victory is likely, and that alone has created a wave of anxiety across the media landscape. So, what does this mean for the future of journalism? Keep watching to find out. Many significant papers were either canceling endorsements or not doing them at all, and the journalism community was quick to come to their peers' defense. The NPR's David Folkenflik asked whether they have held back on these stories to please Trump. Other outlets included MSNBC's Jarvis DeBerry, who suggested that the owners of the Washington Post and LA Times just got weak-kneed and caved to Trump, and a Vanity Fair article warning billionaires might face blowback from the former president. Slate went further, using the Washington Post's motto to suggest that this was democracy's death in darkness. Not even Trump loyalists would embrace the outlet. Still, even CNN's Brian Stelter, known for his critical view of Trump, said in a reliable source's newsletter that appearing to surrender to Trump would do real and lasting harm to any outlet. To such journalists, refraining from endorsing candidates is just an extension of stating that one isn't fully supporting Trump's opponents. They fear management is doing this to avoid any accusations of bias if Trump triumphs, which makes some journalists uncomfortable. These decisions suggest that news executives may believe that Trump is the frontrunner, leading to distress throughout the media industry. How does this reflect the current state of political journalism? Ultimately, what worries the staff at the Post is the idea that Democrats might not secure victory in upcoming elections. So, let's find out with us. The fact that the Washington Post is based in the capital city of the U.S. made the media concerned about the paper's decision not to endorse any presidential candidates. Current and former staff members were quick to defend their practice of donating to Democrats, which they've done since the 80s. Another past executive editor, Marty Baron, accused it of being cowardly and a dark day for democracy. Pulitzer Prize-winning associate editor David Marinas added his voice to the lament, saying, "It is contemptible, and the United States exhibits cowardice in the face of the biggest threat to democracy since World War II's." These bloggers reiterated this in their opinion articles. The newspaper's decision not to endorse a presidential candidate is wrong. Altogether, 18 op-ed writers stated they were let down and argued that this change distorted the image of the values that the newspaper itself stood for. This gave them more of the air of being worried about their posts than earnest journalism. Although some of the journos celebrate themselves as today's Woodward and Bernstein fighting a rogue White House, they are more open archives for the Democratic Party. They even decided not to pay attention to President Biden's mental problems until time became crystallized during a presidential campaign debate. Even the Washington Post's two most famous political reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who covered the Watergate scandal that brought down President Richard Nixon, criticized the decision as one that ignores evidence that emphasizes Trump's dangers to democracy. This notion of a threat to democracy is now a well-worn playbook for many media outlets who appear to be less concerned with accurately covering news than ensuring that the correct team loses this game. Finally, what truly troubles the staff at the Post is that Democrats may lose in future elections. What might this mean for the future of political journalism? This shift started well before their publishers distanced themselves from Harris, almost like rats fleeing a sinking ship. So, let's catch up with us. Some celebrities have been whining loudly while others flat out canceling their subscriptions to some of the most prominent liberal newspapers in America. The reason? They thought that these papers were not left enough for their preferences. This outcry angered journalists, as it appears that the far left is the only audience that they want to hear. They would easily name some social media followers such as the actor, the Fonz Henry Winkler, Jeffrey Wright, the actor John Cryer, and the author of the horror novel Stephen King, to mention a few who have expressed their disappointment. Former Obama-Biden advisor Susan Rice even tweeted her distaste on platform X.
Hi, I'm Susan Rice, one of Senator Obama's senior foreign policy advisors.
Stating that she was a disgusted D.C. native and a lifelong Washington Post consumer. "You have lost us." This situation was a gift and a curse for critics and rival publications who laughed at the far left's so-called purity test that resulted in canceled subscriptions.
Saying more than 200,000 subscribers have canceled their digital subscriptions to the Washington Post.
At the same time, The Atlantic wittily went for it and said, "Don't cancel the Washington Post, cancel Amazon Prime." On the other hand, the paper, which is recognized as the most left-leaning paper in the country, dared to endorse Kamala Harris as the only patriotic choice for president. They also condemn nationalism unless it favors their interest in some way. The reality is that journalists ceased this charade ages ago, not only before young activists started to enter the newsrooms. This situation provides journalists with someone to pinpoint their fault on if Trump gets reelected. However, they'll almost certainly. This shift had begun much earlier than their publishers began to turn their back on Harris. It was like seeing people deserting a sinking ship. The recent action by significant newspapers to cancel endorsements has elicited vested emotions, especially from leftist journalists and those of the same political caliber as them. This move begs the following pertinent questions. Is the media an impartial observer in the political arena? The ambiguity expands the question. Is it shared affectation or shared betrayal? Journalists are still finding out who they are and their role, so the implications for the next election, expected in 2024, can be significant. Will this endorsement freeze bring in a new level of credibility in journalism, Or is it just the result of temporary reluctance to offend? Please feel free to hit the like button and subscribe to our videos if you enjoyed watching this discussion. Your contribution enables us to continue to engage in the crucial talks affecting our democracy today.